How does it feel to have the world's most powerful rocket in operation hibernating in your storage facilities for 3 good years? SpaceX can tell you as its mighty Falcon Heavy rocket has been chilling for years at a time now. However, the story is about to change as the beastly launch rocket is about to roar to life again. Come June 2022, SpaceX will fire up the Super Heavy again as it will be launching to orbit. What payload is the rocket launching, who is the client, and what is Elon Musk's SpaceX doing to ensure the launch goes as smoothly as possible? The last flight of SpaceX's Super Heavy occurred in June 2019, making it exactly 3 years since the powerful rocket went to space. The rocket's maiden flight took place on February 6, 2018, when it lifted off from NASA's historic Kennedy Space Center KSC Pad 39A launch complex. That launch catapulted it into the position of the largest, heaviest, and most powerful active launch vehicle in the world. It also became the third most powerful liquid rocket ever launched, meaning it was rubbing shoulders with the likes of NASA's Saturn V moon rocket and the Soviet Union's ill-fated N-1 and Energia. The next flight occurred after a 14-month wait when an upgraded Block 5 version of Falcon Heavy completed another launch in April the following year. The next flight did not have to wait as long because the Falcon Heavy was back at it in June 2019 when it completed its first ever mission for paying customers. The launch also certified the Super Heavy for launching high-value military payloads for the US Air Force. However, the complete silence from the Super Heavy after this launch has been so loud it's as deafening as the noise made by the last launch. What has followed is the opposite of what every fan of SpaceX expected. Even a year before the last launch, SpaceX was already scheduled to launch the US Air Force's AFSP-C-52, later renamed USS F-52 mission in September 2020. However, by June 2019, it had become known that the USS F-44 mission would skip over USS F-52 to become SpaceX's next Falcon Heavy launch. This was expected no later than late 2020, but things would change by September 2020 when the USS F-44 mission was postponed to February 2021. When February 2021 came, the US military was singing a different tune and pushed USS F-44 to no earlier than October 2021. And by October 2021, the US military had once again delayed USS F-44 to early 22 and USS F-52 to the second quarter of 2022. What exactly was responsible for these delays? While it's clear that SpaceX is not to blame, the US Air Force is a unique client as it doesn't have to reveal its inner workings. It has not publicly admitted to the delays directly, but it has hinted the spacecraft to be launched was the cause. In fact, the military has stopped talking about its launch schedule in public altogether. However, it is not only the military that has postponed launches. SpaceX's private customer Viasat has also been pushing for the first of its 3 launches of the next-generation Viasat-3 communications satellites. It is a direct launch to geostationary orbit that should have taken place in the second quarter of 2022 to the third quarter. What all these delays have achieved is a jam-packed launch schedule for the rest of the year for the Super Heavy. However, other launches have been lined up for the most powerful rocket in operation, as you shall see in this video. For instance, SpaceX has become the only contender to launch what would be the most significant telescope launch in the next decade. This is NASA's Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, which is the agency's next most expensive space telescope after the James Webb. The CEO of United Launch Alliance, Tony Bruno, has stated that his company, SpaceX's primary rival, would not even be in the running for the contract. The planned space telescope is similar mechanically to the iconic and aging Hubble Space Telescope, but it has the advantage of using the latest electronics and sensor technology, which have dramatically improved. Thanks to this, NASA has been able to pack instruments capable of simultaneously imaging 100 times the field of view HST is capable of into a similar package. The NGRST is meant to complement the JWST, which is in the process of being configured and tested. It will weigh at least 4.2 tons or 9,250 pounds and will operate at the L2 Sun-Earth Lagrange point. This is hundreds of thousands of miles from the Earth. Due to the long distance, only large American rockets are in consideration for the $4.3 billion launch. NASA is now working towards a May 2027 launch and is rapidly concluding the preparatory stages. You may wonder why Falcon Heavy is getting the launch contract instead of SpaceX's more powerful Starship or Blue Origin's New Glenn. That is apparently due to a NASA rule that only rockets that have been certified at the time of awarding a contract can compete for a high-value spacecraft launch. So even though the Starship will be ready well before 2027 and may even reduce the cost, it is disqualified from the bidding process. Sensitive spacecraft like the NGRST and JWST have to know their launch vehicle well in advance, as it is usually a factor in its design. You will recall the JWST had to be designed to fold multiple parts so that it could fit onto the Ariane 5 rocket last year. Meanwhile, while the Falcon Heavy rocket has been in hibernation mode, SpaceX has been borrowing its boosters for use in Falcon 9 launches. For example, booster B1052, which was part of Falcon Heavy's Block 5's launch debut, emerged from storage about 30 months later in December 2021 to take part in a Falcon 9 launch. A month and a half later, on January 31st, Falcon 9 B1052 debuted with the flawless launch of Italy's CSG-2 Earth observation satellite. It became the first SpaceX booster of any kind to complete 3 back-to-back return-to-launch site landings. It completed another flight, its 4th, in less than 6 weeks later in a Starlink satellite launch. Early last month, another spacecraft meant as a payload on the Falcon Heavy arrived at Cape Canaveral in preparation for a launch. This is Psyche, a scientific mission that is destined to travel hundreds of millions of miles from Earth. Its mission is to explore an asteroid for which the spacecraft is named. NASA is interested in the asteroid because it is believed to be almost entirely metallic. Psyche is the first time NASA will opt for the Falcon Heavy for a launch and take advantage of its far superior performance and cost saving. The 2,600 kilogram or 5,700 pound spacecraft was assembled at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. SpaceX will use an entirely new Falcon Heavy for the launch, meaning all 3 boosters, upper stage and fairing, have never been used before. Also, the center booster will be sacrificed, as SpaceX plans to do with the USSF-44 launch. However, the Psyche launch has suffered a delay despite arriving ahead of schedule and being the first Falcon Heavy payload to make it to Kennedy Space Center since 2019. NASA did reveal the cause of the delay, and it was due to an issue discovered during software testing. However, the speed at which NASA agreed to postpone the launch by 7 weeks may suggest additional problems like those related to the hardware. As it stands, the USSF-67 is the only mission that has not been postponed in a year, at least not yet. It is still on track for a second-half launch in 2022. USSF-44 is now delayed indefinitely, while the USSF-52 is now looking at an October launch. Viasat, mentioned earlier, is now looking like a last quarter launch. This means SpaceX is warehousing 9 Falcon Heavy boosters. Meanwhile, SpaceX has been confirmed as the launch partner for Hugh's record-breaking satellite. This will be the 10th launch scheduled for the Falcon Heavy. The satellite is named Jupiter 3 and was built by Maxar. It weighs about 9.2 metric tons or 20,300 pounds during liftoff. At that weight, Jupiter 3 will become the largest commercial geostationary satellite ever launched by 30% wet mass. Barring the launch of secret military spacecraft, Jupiter 3 looks set to become the heaviest spacecraft of any kind to reach geostationary orbit, 35,785 kilometers or 22,236 miles above Earth's surface. It may also have the heaviest dry mass of any spacecraft to reach GEO, meaning that the actual hardware it will use to fill its role as a communications hub will also be exceptionally large and powerful. Jupiter 3 will break the record by delivering a maximum bandwidth of 500 gigabits per second. Hughes had earlier stated that the satellite was on track to launch in the 4th quarter of 2022. However, a delay now means the launch is no earlier than early 2023. Let's hear what you think of SpaceX's Falcon Heavy rocket in the comments section below.